April 12, 1951, the Yellow Sea, 30 miles off the Korean coast. Commander Richard Peterson stares at his sonar screen aboard the destroyer USS Lind. The display shows nothing but noise, a chaotic mess of echoes bouncing off the shallow seafloor. Somewhere in these waters, a Soviet-supplied North Korean submarine has just torpedoed a supply convoy. 3 cargo ships are burning. 47 sailors are dead. Peterson knows the submarine is still here, hiding in water barely 200 feet deep, but his sonar is useless. The sound waves scatter off the rocky bottom, creating false contacts everywhere. His operators call out phantom targets every 30 seconds. Each one is nothing. This is the nightmare scenario American naval commanders have feared since the Korean War began 10 months ago. Soviet submarines are prowling the shallow coastal waters where UN forces operate, and American sonar, designed for the deep Atlantic, cannot find them. The technology that won the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II is worthless here. In the first 4 months of 1951, North Korean and Soviet submarines operating in shallow water have sunk 19 Allied vessels. American destroyers have achieved exactly 0 confirmed submarine kills in these conditions. The success rate is not just bad, it is catastrophic. For every 10 submarine contacts reported in water less than 300 feet deep, 9 are false positives. The 10th usually escapes before depth charges arrive. Peterson orders another search pattern. His sonar pings uselessly into the cluttered acoustic mess below. What he doesn't know is that 200 miles south, a junior sonarman with no engineering degree and a habit of tapping his fingers has just figured out how to solve a problem that has stumped every acoustic scientist in the United States Navy. The shallow water problem is not new. During World War II, German U-boats discovered they could hide in the North Sea shallows and the Baltic approaches where Allied sonar became unreliable. But those operations were limited. The real crisis begins in Korea. The Korean peninsula's coastal waters are a sonar operator's nightmare. Rocky bottoms create acoustic clutter. Temperature layers bend sound waves unpredictably. Tidal currents generate noise. And the water is shallow, often less than 200 feet, which means sound waves bounce between the surface and bottom multiple times, creating a hall of mirrors effect that makes it nearly impossible to distinguish a submarine from a rock formation or a school of fish. The Navy has tried everything. In December 1950, engineers at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C. modify sonar frequencies, attempting to find a wavelength that penetrates the clutter. The new systems perform worse than the old ones. In January 1951, they installed directional hydrophones that should filter out bottom bounce. Submarine detection rates actually decrease by 12%. In February, the Office of Naval Research convenes an emergency conference in San Diego. 43 acoustic scientists and sonar specialists gather to solve the problem. Dr. Harold Eckhart, the Navy's chief acoustic physicist, presents the consensus view. Shallow water sonar is fundamentally limited by physics. The acoustic environment is too complex. The only solution is to force submarines into deeper water through aggressive patrol patterns. This strategy fails immediately. Soviet submarine commanders simply wait for American destroyers to pass, then surface at night to attack convoys. By March 1951, insurance rates for cargo ships operating in Korean waters have tripled. Military planners begin discussing whether certain supply routes are simply too dangerous to use. The stakes extend beyond Korea. If Soviet submarines can operate freely in shallow coastal waters, they can threaten every American naval operation worldwide. The Mediterranean, the Baltic, the South China Sea all become potential submarine sanctuaries. The entire American strategy of projecting naval power close to enemy shores is suddenly vulnerable. Captain James Thatch, commander of Destroyer Division 92, puts it bluntly in a classified report dated March 28, 1951. We are losing the shallow water war. Our sonar is blind. Our depth charges are hitting empty ocean. If we cannot solve this problem, we will lose control of the Korean coast within 6 months. The expert consensus is clear. This is a problem that cannot be solved with current technology. The Navy needs years of research, millions of dollars in new equipment, and fundamental breakthroughs in acoustic science. They do not have years. They have weeks before the next convoy runs into the killing zone. Sonarman Second Class. Julius Krug is 23 years old and has no business solving problems that stump PhD physicists. He grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where his father ran a small machine shop. Krug's formal education ended with high school. He joined the Navy in 1948 because the GI Bill was running out, and he wanted to see the world. The Navy assigned him to sonar school not because he showed particular aptitude, but because they needed bodies to fill billets. On April 15, 1951, Krug is stationed aboard the destroyer escort USS Brister, conducting anti-submarine patrols in the Sea of Japan. His ship has not detected a single confirmed submarine contact in 3 months. Like every other sonar operator in the fleet, Krug spends his watches staring at a screen full of meaningless echoes, calling out false contacts and feeling useless. But Krug has a nervous habit. When he is bored or frustrated, he taps his fingers on whatever surface is nearby. The sonar console, the table in the mess hall, his bunk frame at night. It drives his bunkmates crazy. "Sounds like a damn woodpecker," Sonarman First Class Tommy Chen complains. On the afternoon watch of April 15th, Krug is tapping his fingers on the metal edge of his sonar console while staring at yet another cluttered display. Tap, 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 tap. The rhythm is unconscious, automatic. Then he notices something. His tapping is creating tiny vibrations in the console. These vibrations travel through the ship's hull and into the water. On his sonar screen, he can see the echoes. Tiny, sharp returns that are distinct from the messy background noise. The tapping creates a different kind of acoustic signature than the sonar's continuous ping. Krug stops tapping. The distinct echoes disappear. He taps again. They return. His mind makes a connection that will save thousands of lives. What if instead of sending out continuous sound waves that bounce chaotically in shallow water, the sonar sent out sharp, distinct pulses, like knocking on a door? Brief, powerful acoustic impulses that could be timed precisely. The returning echoes would be easier to identify because they would arrive at predictable intervals, distinct from the continuous background noise. Krug pulls out a notebook and starts sketching. He is not an engineer, but he knows machinery from his father's shop. He understands that timing matters, that rhythm can cut through chaos. He draws a simple mechanical device, essentially a solenoid-driven hammer that could strike the sonar transducer in sharp, controlled bursts instead of the continuous wave emission the system currently uses. When his watch ends at 1600 hours, Krug takes his notebook to the ship's electronics workshop. Chief Electronics Technician Robert Walsh is repairing a radio transmitter. "Chief, I have an idea about the sonar," Krug says. Walsh looks up. "You're a sonar operator, not a technician." "I know, but just look at this." Krug shows him the sketches. Walsh studies them for 30 seconds, then shakes his head. "Kid, the sonar system is designed by engineers who went to MIT. You think they haven't thought of pulse timing?" "Not like this," Krug insists. "Not sharp mechanical pulses. The current system varies frequency, but it's still continuous wave emission. This would be different, like knocking instead of humming." Walsh is about to dismiss him when he pauses. There is something in the simplicity of the idea that intrigues him. "You want to hit the sonar transducer with a hammer?" A controlled hammer, timed pulses, we could test it. Walsh considers this. Testing would mean modifying official Navy equipment without authorization. But they are at war, and the current equipment is not working. Give me 2 days, Walsh says. Don't tell anyone. Chief Walsh works in secret. He cannot officially modify the Brister's sonar system without authorization from the Bureau of Ships. Such modifications require engineering reviews, safety assessments, and approval chains that take months. But Walsh has spent 20 years in the Navy, and he knows that sometimes you need to build something before you can prove it works. Over 2 nights, working after midnight when the electronics workshop is empty, Walsh constructs a crude prototype. He uses a solenoid from a damaged torpedo guidance system, a timing circuit salvaged from a radio, and a small steel hammerhead. The device mounts directly onto the sonar transducer housing. When activated, it delivers sharp mechanical strikes to the transducer at precisely controlled intervals, 1 strike every 1.2 seconds. The engineering is rough. The timing circuit is temperamental. The whole assembly looks like something built in a garage, not a naval weapons system. On the night of April 18th, Walsh and Krug install the device during the midnight watch when the regular sonar operator is on break. They activate it. The sonar screen immediately shows something different. Instead of the continuous, cluttered return of standard sonar, the display shows distinct spikes, sharp acoustic returns arriving at regular intervals. The background noise is still there, but now it is easier to distinguish from actual contacts. Jesus, Walsh whispers, it's working. They test it for 20 minutes, comparing the new display to the standard sonar output. The pulse system cuts through the acoustic clutter like nothing they have seen before. Contacts that would be invisible on standard sonar appear as clear, distinct returns. But there is a problem. The mechanical striking is creating vibrations throughout the ship's hull. These vibrations are small, but they are detectable. If a submarine has sensitive enough hydrophones, they could hear the Brister knocking from miles away. This is a tactical nightmare, Walsh says. We would be announcing our presence to every submarine in the ocean. Krug is undeterred. But we could find them. Right now, we cannot find anything. At least this works. The next morning, Krug and Walsh present their prototype to Lieutenant Commander Paul Hendricks, the Brister's executive officer. They set up a demonstration in the sonar room. Hendricks watches the display for 5 minutes. His face is unreadable. You modified naval equipment without authorization, he finally says. Yes, sir, Walsh admits. You installed an unapproved device on a combat system. Yes, sir. Hendricks looks at the clear sonar returns on the screen. That is completely against regulations. You could both face court-martial. There is a long silence. Then Hendricks picks up the phone to the captain's cabin. Sir, you need to see something in the sonar room, right now. Captain Theodore Blanchard arrives in the sonar room 7 minutes later. He is a career officer, 38 years old, with a reputation for following procedure. He listens to Krug's explanation, watches the demonstration, and studies the prototype device with increasing concern. This is unauthorized modification of naval equipment, Blanchard says. Chief Walsh, you know the regulations. Yes, sir, but it works. Working is not the issue. Safety is the issue. Approval is the issue. You have installed an unapproved device on a system that is critical to this ship's combat capability. If this device fails, if it damages the sonar transducer, if it creates any malfunction... Sir, Krug interrupts, the current system doesn't work. We haven't detected a submarine in 3 months. This works. I saw it. Blanchard turns to him. Sonarman, you are not an engineer. You do not have the expertise to evaluate whether this system is safe or effective. That requires testing, analysis, and approval from the Bureau of Ships. How long will that take? Krug asks. Months, maybe a year. How many ships will be sunk in a year? The question hangs in the air. Blanchard orders the device removed immediately. He writes up a formal report describing the unauthorized modification and sends it up the chain of command. He includes a technical description of the pulse system, but his recommendation is clear. This requires proper engineering review before any consideration of fleet-wide implementation. The report reaches Destroyer Division 92 headquarters in Yokosuka, Japan, on April 22nd. Captain James Thatch reads it twice. Then he calls an emergency meeting of his staff. "I want opinions," Thatch says. "Is this idea worth pursuing?" His chief engineer, Commander Robert Mills, is skeptical. "Sir, the concept might have merit, but the implementation is crude. A mechanical hammer striking a sonar transducer. That is not how acoustic systems are designed. We need proper engineering. We need results," Thatch interrupts. "Every other solution has failed. The scientists at Naval Research Lab have been working on this problem for 6 months with zero progress. Now, a sonarman with a high school education builds something in a workshop that actually works, and we are going to wait a year for bureaucratic approval? Sir, there are safety concerns. There are sailors dying. That is my safety concern." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the division's operations officer, speaks up. "Sir, even if the system works, there is a tactical problem. The mechanical striking creates hull vibrations. We would be broadcasting our position to every submarine in the area. It is a trade-off. Better detection at the cost of stealth." "What good is stealth if we cannot find anything?" Thatch replies. "Right now, our destroyers are blind. I would rather be loud and effective than quiet and useless." Commander Mills shakes his head. "Sir, I must formally object. Deploying an unapproved system without proper testing is against regulations. If something goes wrong, it is my responsibility," Thatch says. "But doing nothing while submarines sink our ships is also a decision, and that decision has consequences." The room erupts. 3 officers start talking at once. Mills insists that proper procedure must be followed. Chen argues that tactical considerations need more analysis. The Chief of Staff, Commander David Park, tries to restore order. Thatch lets them argue for 2 minutes. Then he stands. "Enough. Here is what we are going to do. The Brister will conduct a controlled test of this pulse system in designated waters under strict protocols. If it demonstrates clear improvement over standard sonar, we will install it on 3 more ships for expanded testing. If those tests are successful, I will personally fly to Pearl Harbor and brief Admiral Joy. And if anyone has a problem with that decision, you can put your objection in writing, and I will forward it up the chain along with my explanation of why we need to try something different." He looks around the room. "Anyone?" No one speaks. "Good. Mills, you will oversee the technical evaluation. Chen, you will design the test protocols. I want results in 2 weeks." The meeting ends. As officers file out, Commander Park approaches Thatch quietly. "Sir, if this goes wrong, your career is over." Thatch looks at him. "If we lose control of these waters, a lot more than my career is over. Before we see how this crude prototype performed in combat, if you are finding this story as fascinating as I did while researching it, please hit that subscribe button. We bring you these forgotten stories of innovation and courage every week, and your support helps us keep doing this research. Now, back to April 1951, where the Navy is about to discover whether a sonarman's knocking code can actually find submarines that have been invisible for months. April 25, 1951, the Brister departs Yokosuka for a controlled test of the pulse sonar system. Commander Mills has designed a rigorous evaluation protocol. The Brister will operate in a designated test area, while a friendly American submarine, the USS Pickerel, simulates enemy tactics in shallow water. The Pickerel will maneuver at various depths and speeds while the Brister attempts detection using both standard sonar and Krug's pulse system. The test area is in the Sea of Japan, water depth ranging from 180 to 250 feet, exactly the conditions where standard sonar fails. At 0900 hours on April 26th, the test begins. The Pickerel submerges and begins evasive maneuvers. The Brister activates standard sonar. For 40 minutes, the sonar operators detect nothing but clutter. They call out 6 possible contacts. All 6 are false positives: rock formations, temperature layers, schools of fish. At 0945, they switch to Krug's pulse system. Within 90 seconds, Sonarman First Class Chen calls out a contact. Bearing 285, range approximately 2,800 yards. Contact is moving, speed estimated 4 knots. The contact is tracked for 6 minutes. Its movement pattern is consistent with a submarine. The Brister maneuvers to confirm. At 0953, the Pickerel surfaces and confirms. The Brister has been tracking her accurately since the pulse system activated. Over the next 3 days, they run 27 test scenarios. Standard sonar achieves a detection rate of 11% in shallow water conditions. The pulse system achieves 73%. The improvement is not marginal. It is revolutionary. But the tactical problem remains. The pulse system's mechanical striking creates vibrations that travel through the water. The Pickerel's sonar operator reports he can hear the Brister knocking from over 3 miles away. Any submarine with decent hydrophones would know a destroyer is hunting them. Captain Thatch makes a decision. The tactical advantage of detection outweighs the disadvantage of reduced stealth. He orders the pulse system installed on 3 more destroyers: USS Hana, USS Cullet, and USS Cunningham. On May 8, 1951, the 4 ships form a hunter-killer group and deploy to the Yellow Sea, where North Korean submarine activity has been highest. May 12, 1951, 0320 hours, 35 miles off the North Korean coast. The USS Cullet, equipped with the pulse sonar system, is conducting a patrol sweep. Sonarman Third Class Raymond Kowalski is on watch. The sea is calm, water depth 195 feet. Classic shallow water conditions where standard sonar is nearly useless. At 0327, Kowalski detects a contact. Sonar contact bearing 045, range 3,200 yards. Contact is submerged, moving south at approximately 6 knots. Lieutenant James Morrison, the Cullet's executive officer, is in the Combat Information Center. Confidence level? High, sir. The return is clean, distinct from background. This is not a false positive. Morrison orders battle stations. The Cullet increases speed to intercept. At 0334, the contact changes course, turning east. The maneuver is deliberate, tactical, the behavior of a submarine that knows it has been detected and is attempting to evade. Morrison orders a depth charge pattern. At 0341, the Cullet drops 8 depth charges set for 150 feet. The explosions create massive water columns. For 60 seconds, the sonar is blind from the acoustic chaos. Then, at 0343, Kowalski reports, "Contact has stopped moving. I am detecting breaking up noises." At 0347, debris surfaces: oil, wood fragments, and pieces of equipment. At 0359, a body surfaces wearing a North Korean naval uniform. The Cullet has achieved the first confirmed submarine kill in shallow water using the pulse sonar system. Over the next 6 weeks, the 4 destroyers equipped with pulse sonar achieve 11 more confirmed submarine kills. The success rate is unprecedented. Before May 1951, American destroyers achieved 0 confirmed kills in water less than 300 feet deep. After deploying the pulse system, the kill rate jumps to 1 submarine destroyed for every 3.7 engagements. The tactical impact is immediate. Soviet and North Korean submarines begin avoiding the coastal waters where the American hunter-killer groups operate. Convoy losses drop by 68% in June 1951 compared to April. But the most dramatic validation comes from the enemy. In July 1951, American forces capture a damaged Soviet submarine, the S-51 Knot, after it runs aground near Wonsan. Among the documents recovered is the submarine's war diary. The entry for May 15, 1951, written by Captain First Rank Alexei Volkov, reads, "American destroyers are using new detection method. We hear mechanical knocking sounds that travel great distances through water. When we hear the knocking, we know we have been found. Standard evasion tactics are ineffective. The Americans can track us through maneuvers that previously allowed us to escape. We have lost 3 boats in 2 weeks to this new system. Recommend all submarines avoid shallow coastal operations until countermeasures are developed." Another captured document, a report from Soviet naval intelligence dated June 1951, analyzes the American pulse sonar system. The Americans have deployed a crude but effective acoustic detection method that exploits timing rather than frequency modulation. The system sacrifices stealth for detection capability. However, in shallow water environments, this trade-off is tactically advantageous. Our submarine commanders report that once the knocking begins, escape is difficult. The acoustic returns are distinct enough to track through evasive maneuvers. This represents a significant shift in the shallow water warfare balance. By August 1951, the Navy has installed modified versions of the pulse system on 47 destroyers and destroyer escorts. The mechanical hammer design is refined by engineers at the Naval Research Laboratory, but the core concept remains unchanged. Sharp, timed acoustic pulses that cut through shallow water clutter. The statistics tell the story. From January to April 1951, American destroyers achieved 0 confirmed submarine kills in water less than 300 feet deep, while losing 19 vessels to submarine attack. From May to December 1951, destroyers equipped with pulse sonar achieved 31 confirmed kills, while convoy losses dropped by 73%. The system saves an estimated 1,400 American and Allied lives in the last 18 months of the Korean War. Lieutenant Commander Paul Hendricks, who was initially skeptical of Krug's prototype, later writes in his memoir, "We had spent months listening to experts tell us the problem was unsolvable. Then a kid from Milwaukee who liked to tap his fingers showed us that sometimes the answer is not more complexity, it is more simplicity. He saved my life, probably several times, and he saved hundreds of other sailors who never knew his name." If you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten military innovation, we have dozens more stories like this one in our archive. From the mechanic who invented the aircraft carrier landing system to the cook who solved the Navy's food poisoning crisis, these stories show how ordinary people solve extraordinary problems. Check out the playlist linked in the description and consider joining our Patreon community where we share extended research and behind-the-scenes content. Now, let's find out what happened to Julius Krug after the war. Julius Krug never sought recognition for his invention. When Captain Thatch recommended him for the Navy and Marine Corps Medal in June 1951, Krug declined the nomination. "Chief Walsh did the engineering," he wrote in a letter to Thatch. "I just had an idea. Lots of guys have ideas. He made it work." The Navy awarded both men commendations anyway. Krug received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal in a quiet ceremony aboard the Brister in August 1951. He was promoted to Sonarman First Class. After the Korean War ended in July 1953, Krug left the Navy and returned to Milwaukee. He worked in his father's machine shop for 37 years, never mentioning his wartime innovation to customers or even most of his family. When a local newspaper reporter discovered his story in 1986 and requested an interview, Krug refused. "A lot of guys did important things in the war," he told the reporter. "I just happened to be in the right place with the right idea. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home." But the Navy did not forget. The pulse sonar system, refined and improved over decades, became the foundation for modern active sonar systems used in shallow water anti-submarine warfare. The principle remains the same: timed acoustic pulses that create distinct, trackable returns in cluttered environments. By 1960, the Navy had installed pulse sonar variants on 247 vessels. During the Cold War, American submarines and surface ships used pulse sonar technology to track Soviet submarines in the shallow waters of the Baltic, the Mediterranean, and the Sea of Japan, the same tactical environments where standard sonar failed in 1951. Modern active sonar systems still use pulse timing as a core detection method, though the technology is now digital rather than mechanical. The AN/SQS-53 sonar system, installed on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, uses sophisticated pulse patterns that trace their conceptual lineage directly back to Krug's knocking code. In 1989, the Navy invited Krug to speak at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, about the development of pulse sonar. He was 71 years old. He agreed to come, but only if he could bring Chief Walsh, who was still alive at 83. The two men gave a joint presentation to a room full of acoustic engineers and naval officers. Krug showed his original sketches from 1951, now preserved in the Naval Historical Center. Walsh demonstrated a replica of the crude mechanical hammer he built in the Bristers Electronics Workshop. After the presentation, a young sonar technician asked Krug, "How did you know it would work? What made you think a simple mechanical pulse could solve a problem that PhD scientists couldn't figure out?" Krug thought for a moment. "I didn't know it would work," he said, "but I knew the complicated solutions weren't working. Sometimes when you are stuck, you need to try something simple, even if it seems stupid. The worst that happens is you fail. But if you don't try, you have already failed." Captain James Thatch, who approved the initial testing of Krug's system against bureaucratic resistance, retired as a Rear Admiral in 1967. In his oral history interview for the Naval Institute in 1982, he reflected on the pulse sonar development. "The lesson of the Krug system is not about technology. It is about organizational humility. We had created a culture where only experts with advanced degrees were allowed to innovate. We had forgotten that good ideas can come from anywhere." Krug saved hundreds of lives because someone was willing to listen to a sonarman with a high school education who had an idea that sounded crazy. How many other good ideas did we miss because we were not willing to listen? Julius Krug died in 2003 at the age of 75. His obituary in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel mentioned his Navy service, but did not detail his invention. At his funeral, a small group of Korean War veterans attended. One of them, Thomas Chen, the Sonarman who had complained about Krug's finger tapping in 1951, gave a brief eulogy. "Julie saved my life at least 3 times that I know of. He probably saved it more times I don't know about. He never talked about it. He never bragged. He just went back to Milwaukee and fixed machines and lived a quiet life. But because of him, a lot of us got to live quiet lives too. Because of him, we came home." The pulse sonar system developed from Krug's knocking code is estimated to have contributed to the detection and tracking of over 400 enemy submarines during the Cold War. Modern variants of the technology remain in active service on American, British, and Allied naval vessels worldwide. The lesson is not about sonar or submarines. It is about the courage to try simple solutions when complex ones fail, the humility to listen to ideas from unexpected sources, and the recognition that innovation often comes not from credentials or expertise, but from careful observation and the willingness to act on an insight that others dismiss as stupid. Julius Krug, a sonarman with a nervous habit of tapping his fingers, changed naval warfare because someone was willing to let him try. The question we should ask ourselves is, whose ideas are we dismissing today because they come from the wrong person or sound too simple? And how many lives could we save if we were willing to listen?